Hello, my name is Isaac, and this is the Casual Pokédex. On this channel, I'm working through a long-term project to systematically test which Pokémon are actually good in a casual playthrough. In my first video, I explained the full methodology behind these tests, but the short version is this. I semi-randomly generate a team of Pokémon that can theoretically cover every type. Then I complete a full playthrough of a game where that team is available and evaluate how each Pokémon performs over the course of the run. The team for this playthrough was Arcanine, Leafeon, Galarian Stunfisk, Weavile, Togekiss, and Grapploct. My pre-run expectations for each Pokemon were that Arcanine would be either a B or A tier because it was a counterpart to Ninetales and its offensive stats were amazing, along with its coverage options, along with the priority extreme speed. Leafeon was the Pokemon that I likely had the most insight for because I already tested two other evolutions, being Jolteon, who was a B tier in Arceus, and Umbreon, who was an S tier in Soul Silver. Given its high physical bulk and low special bulk, I was concerned that it would perform similarly to Tangrowth, so I predicted either C or B tier performance. I had low hopes for Galarian Stunfisk because I had never heard of anyone actually using it. It has good typing, but its moveset was subpar and not jiving with its stats too well. It learned very few offensive stab moves and had a low speed stat. I thought it would probably be C tier. I expected Weavile to be an A tier. I had used it before and it's sort of the ice type people think of when they mention more ideally designed ice types because its high attack and speed stats mean it's less likely to take a hit, which is big for the worst defensive type in the game. I'd never used a Togekiss before, but I had tried to use a Togetic in my first ever Soul Silver playthrough and was disappointed. Togekiss is not Togetic, and with good bulk and special attack, I predicted A tier performance. For Grapploct, I predicted either B or A tier because while it isn't very fast, it has decent bulk and can hit hard. It is available just before the 7th gym, which has been a pretty good window for some team members to join in the past. My starter choice was Sobble because the first two members that I would get, Arcanine and Leafeon, would have the other two starter types covered. Also, time for a slightly hot take right off the bat. But I think that Pokemon Sword and Shield were the point where the visuals for the Pokemon felt like they fit the visuals for the environment the best out of all the games, aside from Gen 1 where they were both awful. I mean, sure, you had the poor quality trees here and there, but this was Pokemon's first game where they actually had to make trees. But what about all the forests in the early games, you may ask? And my answer is older Pokemon games didn't need to make various trees. They used tiles, and most regions reused the same tree sprites across huge areas. The peak of variety came in black and white with seasonal changes, but even then it was still just swapping between a handful of 2D tiles. Sword and Shield is the first time they had to build unique 3D tree assets aside from Lush Jungle, where you spend approximately 5 minutes in the Alola games. So it's understandable why they look kinda bad. Granted, there's no main overarching story in Sword and Shield, but it's visually a place where both Pokemon and people can live, rather than in ZA, where you're looking at cardboard boxes cosplaying as buildings, or in Scarlet Violet, where the open world environment looks cheaply done. It was also the last game to have the B-roll when you were considering what moves to make rather than just showing a static camera angle that you have to move yourself. This game felt the most like a place where people and Pokemon lived together. My first team member was a Growlithe, who I caught just past Motostoke, and I named her Blitz. I immediately evolved Blitz using a stone that I found in the wild area, and taught it the moveset that it would have for the rest of the playthrough, because there is absolutely no downside to rushing evolution when you can relearn moves for free from the start of the game. Bead was the first major battle that I had after getting Blitz, and since Blitz had Crunch, all of his Pokemon were O-code. The next thing I did was catch an Eevee that I named Thorn, and evolved into Leafeon right off the bat, because it's always best to evolve your Eevee as soon as possible. Unless you're playing Let's Go Eevee where it can't evolve. After sweeping Milo with Blitz, I came to my first fight with Hop after getting some team members that I care about testing for this playthrough. I led with my substitute Thievel, who took out his Wooloo, then I sent in Blitz on his Corvusquire, and after Play Rough did half of his bird's health, he leered at Blitz, so another Play Rough took it out. My substitute Drizzile took out his Fire Rabbit. For the gym battle with Nessa, I led Thorn, who took care of her fish with one Razor Leaf each, before her big turtle came out and took two Razor Leaves to take out, dealing minimal damage to Thorn in the process. The next thing that happened was a rich man inviting me to dinner before yapping for a few minutes and leaving before we even got served our drinks or could even order. The rich are all liars. The next battle with Bede ended up much like the first one did. Blitz ate all of his Pokémon. Now I was able to catch a Stunfisk who I named Crush. Back in Motostoke was the fight with Marnie. I led with my substitute Stuffle, who took out her Krogunk after she used a potion. I sent in Blitz on her Scraggy and Play Rough O-Code. I sent in Crush to deal with her Morpeko, and after taking a bite, a Mudshot took out her Morpeko. I led Crush into the Kabu fight, and this was the first difficult fight of the run. Probably the closest I came to a defeat, aside from the champion fight. I opened with a Mudshot on his Ninetales. His Will-O-Wisp missed, and Mudshot did less than half, and dropped its speed. Crush took another Ember that did about a third of his health, and his next Mudshot put Ninetales in the red. I was expecting Kabu to go for a heal, like gym leaders in every other game would do, but he went for an Ember, leaving Crush at just over a third of his health, as Crush went for a Metal Sound. Another Ember put Crush in the red before he was able to take the Ninetales down. I stayed in as he sent out his Arcanine and switched to Blitz so that his Flash Fire ability would absorb the incoming attack. I Dynamaxed Blitz and took a bite from his Arcanine as my Max Flare did over half of its health. Blitz took another hit from Bite before taking out his Arcanine with a Max Darkness. Out came his Centiskorch and he Dynamaxed. My Max Strike outsped and took a quarter of its health, as Kabu's Max Flutterby did a quarter of Blitz's health, as Blitz's Dynamax ended. I went for an extreme speed that left his Centipede at over half health, and his Max Flutterby left Blitz at just under half health. The next E-Speed took his Centiskorch down to 1/3, and his Max Flutterby left Blitz just over the red as his Dynamax wore off. My next extreme speed put his Centiskorch in the red as he went for a smoke screen, allowing one last extreme speed to win the battle. Now unfortunately, because I overestimated the autosave feature, I had to fight him twice. This time I led with Crush and opened with a Mudshot on his Ninetales. His Will-O-Wisp landed and Mudshot did less than half of Ninetales' HP. Crush took an Ember that did about a quarter of his health, and his next Mudshot put Ninetales in the red. I went for a Sucker Punch and took out his Ninetales. With over half health left on Crush, I stayed in against his Arcanine. After taking a Flame Whale from the Arcanine, Crush was left in the red, and a Mudshot dropped Arcanine into the yellow. I went for a Sucker Punch that did baby damage and fell to a Flame Whale. I sent in Blitz, and a Crunch left his Arcanine in the red as it used Agility. My E-Speed took it down the next turn. His Centiskorch came out, and we both Dynamaxed. My Max Strike did about a quarter of its health, and his G-Max Centiferno was absorbed by Blitz's Flash Fire ability. My next Max Strike dropped him below half health as his Max Flutterby did baby damage. My next Max Strike put him just above red as his second Max Flutterby did baby damage again. We both shrank and my E-Speed KO'd the next turn. On the way to Hammerlock, I caught a Sneasel that I named Lunge and gained a new appreciation for shiny hunters while searching a whole day for the 1 in 50 Togepi encounter in Bridgefield. I almost ended up fainting it, which would have been horrible, but I managed to catch it in the friend ball that the ball guy gave to me. I named Togepi Tap and evolved them all the way. I led Tap into the Hop fight and opened with an Air Slash on his Cramorant, but he dove, so I missed. Next turn he hit me for just under half health, and Tap's air slash did about two-thirds of his. The regurgitated fish ended up putting Tap below half health. His next attack was a fury attack that did baby damage as air slash took Cramorant out. I switched to Crush as he sent in his Toxel, and after his baby lizard's flail did 1 HP of Crush's health, and Earth Power took it out. I sent Thorn in on his Silicobra, and Leaf Blade took out the snake. I sent Crush back in on his Raboot, and after taking a Flame Charge that did less than half an Earth Power, put Raboot in the red, Hop healed it, and Earth Power KO'd. For the Alistair fight, I led Lunge, and Throat Chop took out both his Yamask and Cursula. I switched to Tap on his Mimikyu, and Air Slash broke the disguise as it slashed a small chunk of Tap's health. The next turn, Tap took another slash and Air Slash missed. This time Mimikyu went for Hone Claws, and Air Slash dropped it to less than half. After another slash put Tap in the yellow, one last Air Slash took out the Mimikyu. I sent Lunge back in on the Gengar, and after we both Dynamaxed, a Max Darkness took out the Gengar. While trying to stop Bede from committing an act of terrorism, I led Blitz because Lunge was already at the level cap for the next gym. This was actually the hardest fight with Bede yet, as Blitz's Crunch was not able to OHKO every member of his team. After it took out his Duosion, it left his Gothorita in the red, allowing it to get off a Psybeam that did a bit over a quarter of Blitz's health and confused her. Next turn, Bede potioned and Crunch took out the Gothorita. His Ponyta fell to a Crunch, and against his Hatchrim, Crunch left it in the red, allowing it to get off his Psybeam. That dropped Blitz below half health and confused her again. The next Crunch ended the fight. Turns out that Bede's act of terror uncovered some old statues that Sonia was interested in, but the chairman took him away to face the consequences for his actions. Against Opal, I let Crush on her Wheezing and went for a Metal Claw. After her Fairy Wind did baby damage, my Metal Claw did about 1/3 of her Wheezing's health. I got a stat boost from answering her question, and next turn my Metal Claw outsped, putting her in the red while her Fairy Wind did more baby damage. The next Metal Claw put the Wheezing down. I stayed in on her Mawile, and an Earth Power took it out. Her next question boosted my bulk significantly, and out came her Togekiss. Her Air Slash did baby damage, but flinched Crush. She flinched Crush again the next turn, but the turn after that, Metal Claw did about a quarter of the Togekiss's health. Crush got flinched again the next turn before getting a hefty offensive boost from her next question. The turn after, I put her Togekiss in the red with another Metal Claw, and with a Sucker Punch took her out the very next turn. With Crush sitting just under half health, I stayed in on her Alcremie, and we both Dynamaxed. Max Steel Spike outsped and put her Cake in the red as her G-Max Finale did baby damage and healed her into yellow health. My next Max Steel Spike ended the battle. Somehow Bede did not face any legal consequences for his destruction of a national monument, and as I was about to give him a piece of my mind, I watched as a creepy old woman kidnapped him. I guess all's well that ends well. Next was another fight with Hop, and I led Lunge into his Trevenant, which fell to a Throat Chop. I switched Blitz into his Cinderace, and after taking in Acrobatics that did just under a third of Blitz's health, a Play Rough did baby damage and dropped the Cinderace's attack. After a few more turns, I was able to drop Cinderace below half health and got another attack drop, so I switched in Crush as the Cinderace went for an Agility. It went for another Agility and fell to an Earth Power. I stayed in against Heatmore, and after Fire Lash did less than half, Earth Power took out his Anteater. I switched in Thorn on his Boltund, and after his Crunch did less than half, a Leaf Blade put Boltund in the red. Hop healed, and I Leech Seeded. Next turn his Crunch did baby damage, and Leaf Blade took out his dog. I sent in Tap on his Snorlax, and Air Slash did about 1/3 of its health, and his Heavy Slam did just under half of Tap's health. My next Air Slash missed, and he put Tap in the red, so I switched to Thorn, who ate a Heavy Slam, and used Charm the next turn, taking a Body Slam in the process. Then I Leech Seeded, taking another Body Slam, Leaf Blade left it in the red the next turn, and Leech Seed took out the Snorlax. For the Melanie fight, I led Blitz, and a Flamethrower took out her first three Pokémon. I switched to Crush as she sent in her Lapras, and we both Dynamaxed. Her Max Geyser did just over half of Crush's HP, and Max Steel Spike did baby damage. I used Max Guard to burn a Dynamax turn, and fell to her next Max Geyser. I sent in Lunge, and a Throat Chop left it at just above half health as it went for an Icy Wind that did baby damage. Metal Claw dropped Lapras below half health, and its next Icy Wind dropped Lunge's speed enough for Lapras to outspeed the next turn, and a Surf dropped Lunge to 1/4 health, and a Throat Chop put her Lapras in the red. Since I no longer outsped, I switched to Thorn, who ate a Surf and ended the battle with a Leaf Blade. Another fight with Hop followed, and I led Lunge into his Dubwool. A Throat Chop put his Sheep to around half health. He went for a takedown that did just less than half, and the recoil putting him in range for my next Throat Chop to KO. That is why I don't use recoil moves. He sent in Cinderace, and I switched to Tap to resist his fighting type moves. He outsped with Pyro Ball, doing over half of Tap's health, and Air Slash doing just over half of Cinderace's health. I switched to Blitz to absorb a Pyro Ball, and in extreme speed dropped Cinderace to a Sliver, allowing it to get decent damage off before it fell the next turn. I sent in Crush on his Pincurchin, and an Earth Power KO'd. I stayed in on Snorlax and Iron Defense before he hit me with a Crunch that did baby damage, but dropped my defense. After a couple of identical turns, I was at +3 defense and started spamming Earth Powers. 5 turns later, his Snorlax went down. I sent in Blitz on his Corviknight, and a Flamethrower ended the fight. I was finally able to catch a Clobbopus that I named Nelson, evolved him, and was finally able to obtain the Razor Claw to evolve Lunge. By the time I made it to the Marnie fight, Nelson was the only member of the team still under the level cap. I led with Nelson, her Liepard hit him with a Torment as I used Bulk Up. My next move was Octolock, and her Liepard used Nasty Plot. I got hit with a Sucker Punch the next turn, but Brick Break took out her cat. Her Toxicroak came out, and I went for Octolock because it hit me for 1/3 of Nelson's health. He used Swagger, and I used Bulk Up. Her Toxicroak hit a Venoshock that left Nelson at 1/3 HP, but then it fell to a Brick Break. Out came her Scrafty, who swaggered as I healed Nelson. Nelson got hit with a Brick Break that did baby damage as I used Octolock. Next I got hit with a Scary Face as Brick Break took her Scraggy down. She sent out her Morpeko, and I went for another Bulk Up and got hit with a Spark. Another Spark hit, and Nelson hit himself in his confusion. Another Spark in reversal later, and the fight was over. Against Piers, I led with Nelson again, after he used Fake Out for the first turn. Next turn, after getting hit with his Scrafty Sand Attack, I got him in an Octolock. He used Brick Break, and Nelson bulked up. 2 more bulk ups later, and I healed. And a few turns after that, and I was able to land a reversal to take out his Scrafty. He sent out a Malamar, and a superpower took it out, but not before it hit with a Psycho Cut. Obstagoon came out, and a reversal put it in the yellow, but it used Counter and took out Nelson. I sent in Tap to Dazzling Gleam, but he used Obstruct, and the next turn he used Shadow Claw before falling to a Dazzling Gleam. I sent in Crush on his Skuntank, and after Crush got screeched, an Earth Power ended the fight. Now against Raihan, I led both Tap and Thorn into his Gigalith and Flygon. Flygon's Thunder Punch did about 1/3 of Tap's health, and Thorn's Leaf Blade did most of Gigalith's health, allowing Tap's Dazzling Gleam to finish off the Gigalith and put Flygon in the red. His Sandaconda came out, and Flygon's Thunder Punch put Tap at 1/4 health. Thorn used Leaf Blade to drop Sandaconda to red health, and Tap's Dazzling Gleam took both on Raihan's side of the field out. Then he sent out his Duraludon, and as he Dynamaxed, I switched Tap and Thorn out for Nelson and Crush. He hit Crush with a max steel spike that did baby damage, and I Dynamaxed Nelson. I went for a max knuckle. His max knuckle landed on Crush first, doing most of Crush's health. My max knuckle did about one-third of Duraludon's, and Earth Power from Crush took out the Duraludon. For the final Marnie fight, I led Thorn on her Liepard and used Leech Seed, and she used Snarl that did about one-third of Thorn's health. She used Torment and Thorn's Swords Dance, then as she used Nasty Plot, Thorn's X-Scissor took out her cat. She sent out her Toxicroak and I used Leech Seed as she used Venoshock, which dropped Thorn below half. My Leaf Blade put her Toxicroak in the red, and her Venoshock took Thorn out. I sent out Tap as she used a full restore, and an Air Slash took her Frog out. I switched to Crush on her Morpeko, and after taking a crunch, Earth Power KO'd. I sent in Nelson on her Scrafty and got swaggered as I used Bulk Up. The next turn, Superpower KO'd. I sent Crush back in on her Grimmsnarl, we both Dynamaxed, and after a G-Max snooze did less than half, Max Steel Spike took her below half. Next turn, the fight was over. For the final fight against Hop, I led with Thorn again, and Leech Seeded his Dupwool as he used Cotton Guard. Next turn, I used Swords Dance, and his Body Slam did baby damage. Then my Leaf Blade put him at about quarter health, and his Body Slam got the paralysis. Leech Seed took Dubwool's health down to red. He full restored, and Leaf Blade put him right back in the yellow, with it falling the next turn. As he sent out his Corviknight, I sent out my Blitz and blitzed his bird. As his Snorlax came out, I accidentally sent in Tap and immediately switched to Nelson, who took one-third damage on the switch, and a superpower took out the Snorlax. I sent in Crush on his Pincurchin, who lived the first Earth Power and used that turn to curse, so it went down the next turn. I sent Tap in on his Cinderace, and 2 max Airstreams later, I beat Hop. Next came the weirdest storyline in all of Pokémon, and it goes like this. Leon is late for dinner. His brother decides to check on him. The lady from the government doesn't like that, and we get attacked by some employees with a low-level street gang helping us out for some reason. When we get to the tower, the government lady attacks me. The fight went like this. I led with Blitz on her Frostlass, and after taking baby damage from a Hex, the Frostlass goes down. I sent in Thorn on her Milotic, and after a Leaf Blade put her in the red, the Milotic used Aqua Ring, so the next Leaf Blade took it out. I sent in Crush on her Salazzle, and after taking an Incinerate that did less than half of Crush's health, an Earth Power KO'd. I sent in Lunge, who had at long last learned an Ice-type move on her Sarina, and an Ice Punch took it out. I sent Crush back in on her Garbodor, we both Dynamaxed and exchanged Max Quakes, and while mine did less than half, hers left me at quarter health. I used Max Guard to burn a Dynamax turn and fell to her next Max Quake. As she shrank back down, I sent in Nelson. She Toxic Spiked and I Octo-Locked. She set up another Toxic Spikes and my Superpower left her in the red. Her Gunk Shot put Nelson in the red, but my next Superpower put her in the dumpster. And in the end, the reason Leon was late for dinner is because his meeting with the chairman went a bit longer than expected. We raided a rich man's tower because we were worried that the strongest trainer in the region was late for dinner. What the actual fuck? For the bead fight, I led Blitz on his Mawile. Now I could say that this was all part of my plan to lead off with Pokemon strong against his lead, but the truth is I forgot about the bead fight entirely and knew that there was a space between the opening ceremony of the championship and the fight with Nessa, and I just lazily didn't change my team around yet. Either way, a flamethrower ended his Mawile. I switched in Crush on his Gardevoir, and after taking a Psychic, Metal Claw did most of her health. She used Wish and fell to my next Metal Claw. His Rapidash came out, and after his Psycho Cut left me at 3/4 health, Metal Claw put the horse in the red, and then the wish took effect, mostly healing the horse, and my next Metal Claw KO'd. His Hatterene came out, and we both Dynamaxed. Max Steel Spike did over half of Hatterene's HP, and her Max Flare put Crush in the red. But the next Max Steel Spike ended the fight. I led tap on Nessa's Golisopod and took it out with an Air Slash. I then switched to Thorn on Seaking and used Swords Dance as she set up an Aqua Ring. I proceed to sweep Seaking, Pelipper, and Barraskewda, taking an Ice Fang that did little damage before her Dreadnought came out and she Dynamaxed. But Leaf Blade still OHKO'd. Alistair's fight was cake. Lunge OHKO'd every single one of his team, even a Dynamax Gengar, without Dynamaxing. I started the fight against Raihan using Crush, and using Earth Power to take out his Torkoal in one hit. I switched to tap on his Turtonator and Dynamaxed. His Turtonator, Goodra, and Flygon all fell to max Starfall before my Dynamax wore off, and I switched to Nelson for his Duraludon. Nelson ate a Max Knuckle that did about a third of his health before getting off an Octolock. G-Max Depletion put Nelson at 1/4 health, and a reversal did likewise to Duraludon. But Duraludon was faster and took out Nelson the next turn. I switched in Crush, who ate a Dragon Claw before ending the fight. As I faced off with Leon, the rich dude decided that right this fucking second was the perfect time to solve a problem that wouldn't happen for 1,000 years by causing the darkest day. That would be like Galileo dropping a bomb on the ancient Olympics because coal is a limited resource and greenhouse gases are killing the planet. Not technically wrong, but do we need to fix that right this second? We're kinda in the middle of something here. I had Blitz sweep all of Rose's team, but when his Copperajah came out, I got cocky and didn't Dynamax. My Flamethrower did just barely half of his health, and his Max Quake put Blitz at 3 HP and boosted his special defense. Not taking any risks, I Dynamaxed and took out his Copperajah. This dude is, and always will be, the dumbest antagonist in all of Pokemon. Then Leon decided to capture a legendary Pokemon in a regular Pokeball. But to be fair, Eternatus has the same catch rate as Caterpie, so you can't really blame him. In the fight against Eternatus, I led Crush, and after Flamethrower did most of Crush's health, and Earth Power did less than half of Eternatus's, I switched to Blitz to absorb the next Flamethrower. And after a Play Rough dropped it below half, Blitz lost most of its health to a Dynamax Cannon. I switched to Tap and took damage from a Flamethrower before switching to Lunge, who took a Cross Poison, before finishing the fight with an Ice Punch. Then the max raid battle against Eternatus happened, and considering that you get hard carried by the dogs during that fight, it does not apply to my experiment. Now for the finale of this test, the fight with Leon. I led Lunge on his Aegislash, and a Throat Chop put it in the red before Sacred Sword OHKO'd Lunge. I sent in Blitz, who took out the sword with a Flamethrower. I swapped in Tap on his Haxorus and took an Iron Tail before putting the X-Dragon down with a Dazzling Gleam. I sent in Nelson against his Rhyperior, and Earthquake did over half of Nelson's health before a Superpower did just over half of his. Nelson fell the next turn. I sent in Thorn and took out the Rhyperior the next turn. For some reason I thought that Bug was super effective against ghosts and left Thorn in against Dragapult. And surprising to me, X-Scissor did nothing to it, causing Thorn to fall to the Dragapult. I sent in Tap, but they fell to a Thunderbolt. I sent in Blitz and took a Shadow Ball before hitting it into the red with a Play Rough. His next Shadow Ball crit and lowered Blitz's special defense, but the next Play Rough took out the dragon. I stayed in on the Rillaboom and a Flamethrower OHKO'd. I stayed in on the Charizard too, and used an E-Speed to get a little chip off on it before a Max Rockfall took Blitz out. I sent in Crush and Dynamaxed. I had taught I had taught Rock Slide just for this Charizard, and after taking a G-Max Wildfire, my Max Rockfall took out the Charizard. Now for the final rankings for Experiment 7. Arcanine goes in S tier without a doubt. He basically one-shot any opponent he came up against, and the early evolution was just way too overpowered. He swept every bead fight before I got Sneasel, and the only one after because Sneasel was already at the level cap, and he swept Milo and Rose, and he carried the fight against Kabu as well. Arcanine also took down most of Melanie's team. Leafeon is a bit harder to place because aside from Nessa, Galar isn't too friendly to grass types. Leafeon did sweep Nessa both fights with her without even Dynamaxing though, so I'll probably give Leafeon an A tier. Weavile is another A tier because I want to put it in S, but it's held back by the fact that they don't naturally learn an Ice type move that goes with their insane attack stat. The only one that is good that can be learned via TM is Ice Punch, which is only accessible in Winden, the last town in the game. They did sweep Alistair both times though, except Togekiss took out his Mimikyu the first time, and like Arcanine, he basically one-shot any opponent that his Dark type was super effective against, aside from Leon's Aegislash at the very end. Togekiss is also a good A tier because the bell-shaped curve on my tier list is non-existent. They did struggle a bit early on in the neutral matchups, but once they got some EVs, they pulled their weight with the rest of them. Its ability, Serene Grace, would have been more useful if it could actually outspeed opponents and flinch with Air Slash, and it had no big sweeps, but it's still a good A tier. Stunfisk is an interesting one because its typing and stats are really good for defense, but its move pool was absurdly subpar. Its only steel-type move was Metal Claw, which is only 50 base power, and its best ground move was Earth Power that I taught it with a TR, which is unfortunate because its attack stat is better than its special attack. Its ability would open interesting avenues if it could learn any terrain moves, which it can't unless it's Dynamaxed and uses Snap Trap, which has subpar damage, and is grass type, so it isn't stab, at least in Gen 8, but it did sweep Opal and took out Leon's Charizard at the very end, but I'll have to put it in B tier. C tier would be Grapple Lock, and it's a really low C tier. I wouldn't usually dock points for a pre-Gym 7 arrival on the team if there was more content after the 7th gym, and though Octolock is an interesting move that allows Grapple Lock to spam Superpower without losing any offensive damage, it's only useful for one Pokemon on the opponent's team, then you've been marshmallowed by repeated stat drops, so sweeping isn't even a possibility. And they made such a small impact after joining the team that I have to put them in C tier. These are just my experiences with these Pokemon, and your experience may have been very different depending on the game or team you used. If you had a different run with them, I'd love to hear about it in the comments, and if you'd like to follow along as I work through the long process of ranking every Pokemon line, feel free to subscribe. Surprise, it's me. Hi, I'm Isaac. I'm the person behind what was uh, the casual Pokedex. But as you've probably, maybe you've noticed if you've been paying attention over the past week after my 3 months of silence, is that I did a bit of an overhaul on the channel. And at the start of this video, I recorded all of the voice lines for this video before I took my 3 month break. I needed to take it because it was just too much editing, too much Pokemon. I love Pokemon, but it was just every ounce of my free time was eaten up by Pokemon. And I have so many other interests than just Pokemon. So it was burnout and other stuff I needed to handle, personal stuff. But now I'm back. I will be doing some live streams for some video games. Mondays is, no, not Mondays. Mondays. I'm not going to be streaming Mondays or Tuesdays. I'll probably be maybe releasing videos on my other channel, my reactions channel. It's called Isaac's Analyses if you want to go subscribe. And so on this channel, I plan to release 3 videos a week. They're just edited down versions of the streams that I'll be doing on those days. But I'll be releasing the videos of the streams a week after I do the streams. And I'll be releasing it while the stream is going. So if you get to one of my videos, you can just go to my live stream to watch the next video before it happens. And so Wednesdays are gonna be Pokemon if I can figure out a way to get an emulator. I don't have a capture card for my Switch, so some of the more recent Pokemon games are gonna be out of my potential to do for a while. I will get a capture card eventually. It's just I'm not in position to get one right now, nor do I know how to get one. Uh, Thursdays is going to be Hollow Knight streams, and Fridays I don't know yet. I'm leaning towards Skyrim streams because I can definitely do a couple of projects in Skyrim. And then Saturday and Sunday, I'm going to be streaming on my Isaac's Analyses channel, uh, where I'm doing live reactions to anime. I'd like to do 7 anime a week, 2 episodes for each anime a week, so 14 episodes a week. And I know that, well, One Piece isn't going to be 2 episodes, it's going to be 1 episode in the chapter reaction because I'm all caught up and there's no point in me watching through all of it for a third time. Because, yes, I've watched through it twice. And the other one that I've got locked down is going to be Bleach. Because I've watched it before and I hate it. And I want to go through it and break it down analytically for why I think it's a terribly written show. There are 2 shows that I will not be watching ever. Well, maybe not ever for one of them, but Mushika Tensei is one that I will never be watching because I don't think Rufujin needs or should deserve any support for that trash he's writing. And the other one's Demon Slayer for a totally different reason. I just don't like Tanjiro's character design. It just unsettles me. But if you guys can get me to 1 million subscribers on that channel, I'll watch it. Good luck, the 5 or 6 of you, 4 or 5 of you that are not that are subscribed to me that are not me or my family. So yeah, that's something for you to work towards. So hey, yeah, this is me. This is the face you'll be seeing. That editing method was just too much for me. Thank you. If you're still here after these 3 months, thank you so much. And I plan to not do that again, at least until October. I have my sister's wedding is in October and I gotta go attend that. So there's gonna be like 3 or 4 days where I won't be streaming in October. And also later this month, as you might be able to tell, new apartment, my I'm going to be moving some things into this apartment later this month. So thank you so much for sticking around, and I will do better from now on. See you tomorrow or today if I manage to get a stream up.